Hello and welcome to a new watercolour video. Today I'm going to be doing this watercolour painting. This is beginner level, so if you're a beginner you can follow along with this, and it's fairly simple, straightforward wet in wet techniques that I'm going to show you how to do step by step. So I did do this one a few weeks back and did this one with Neocolor too, and that's also on my channel if you want to watch that if you haven't already seen it. If you go to my video page you can see all my videos, and you can download the outline free of charge if you don't want to draw this yourself. I've got it on my Patreon, it's completely free. You can just download that and print it out. I'll also list all the colours that I'm using. I'm using Daniel Smith paints, but you don't need to. You can use any paints at all. It doesn't matter if they're professional or the student grade. Just go for similar colours. So to get the outline onto the paper, you can trace it onto your paper if you like, or use a light box, but because I'm using a watercolour block, which means the paper's glued down on all four sides, I can't do that. So I'm going to use another pretty easy method. It's quite a well-known method, but I'll show you how to do it just in case you don't know. So if you're not going to draw the outline yourself and you print this out on your printer and then test to see if it's the right size on the paper that you want, then turn the paper over and then get a graphite pencil. I'm using a 3B here, so it's quite soft. And then just colour over the back of all the lines. So on the area where there's a lot more detail, just colour the whole thing in. Then when it's done, turn it back round so the graphite is touching the paper. Line it up on your page so that it's nice and straight. Just get some tiny little bits of low tack tape, like masking tape or washi tape. And just put a couple of little bits on there just to hold it in place. I'm going to do one on each side just to make it really secure so it doesn't move about. And then get a fairly sharp pencil and just trace the line. Press it quite firmly. You could even use a coloured pencil just so you know where you've already been. And then that will press the graphite into the paper and leave the line, leave a pencil line for you. Then when you remove your tape, you should have a faint pencil line underneath, and that's all you need to do. So I kind of want the corners to be a little bit more rounded, so I'm just going to erase that and just kind of round them off a little bit because I think it'll look nicer that way. There we go. I think it looks cuter with rounded corners. This one was just straight corners, but I'm just going to make this one a little bit different. And then I'm going to put washi tape around the edge as well, because I'm going to have this border and then another border on the outside of this. Just kind of notice this border is a little bit wider on than this side, so I'm just going to take that line a little bit further over. And then just join the hills up with the line. I forgot to mention, this is the paper that I'm using. It's Archie's cold press and it's a square format. You don't have to use the same paper as me, but cotton paper is best. It's just easier to work on, but you don't have to use cotton paper. You'll just find that if you don't use cotton paper, you'll get more watermarks and stuff, whereas a cotton paper dries more evenly and you're less likely to get watermarks. But there's loads of different brands of cotton paper. This just happens to be the one that I'm using. Okay, so I'm going to start by painting a wash over the whole page. So these are the brushes that I'm going to use. So for painting like the larger areas, this is a mop brush, but it's a synthetic mop brush. It's number 2 Vinci Casaneo, and that's good for covering large areas. And then when I'm doing the smaller detail, I'm going to switch to a number 2 round. This one's by Showel, but yeah, just a small round brush, just whatever you have. The first colour I'm going to put down is Raw Sienna Light. This is a Daniel Smith colour. Yeah, but you just want a nice, quite a watered down wash of like a really light ochre colour. And then I'm just going to do a quick wash over the whole thing. And then I'm going to leave that to completely dry. Now you can use a hairdryer or a heat tool to dry it. So I'm just going to go off, leave this for a while and then come back later. Okay, so unfortunately that wasn't recording while I did that sky bit, but I'm just going to show you how to do it again. It's exactly the same process. I wet the whole area with water. I'm using a large brush for this hill here, and then a smaller brush to go around these tighter areas. So if you tilt your paper like this, so you can see that shine in the light, then you can see if there's any dry areas that you've missed, either areas that have kind of dried up a little bit or areas that you've completely missed. So I'm not painting these areas yet because this area is still wet. So we'll do that when these areas have dried. And then I'm getting some raw Sienna Light onto my brush, so it's quite strong on the brush. So I'm taking it straight from the pan. And then I'm going to drop in some shaded areas. So it's going to kind of go right round the edge, the top edge. Down the side. Across the bottom. We want to leave kind of a lighter patch here in the middle. I'll scoop some of that out in, so we'll just take it kind of up there, leave a bit of a lighter patch towards the top. We want it more concentrated at the bottom. Because the paper's wet, this is wet in wet technique, and it's just spreading nicely into the wet area. You don't need to actually manipulate it with the brush too much, just a little bit, but just drop the paint in where you want it. But it mustn't be too watery, the paint on the brush, otherwise you'll create watermarks. Now I've just got a damp brush, I've wiped that off on the towel, and then I'm just going to blend this area up here. We want a nice graduation of colour from the darkest at the bottom and then going a bit lighter towards the top. Quite dark around this area. And then we just want it to be lighter across the top, so I'm just kind of pulling the colour back out across the top of that hill. I want it to be quite dark in this area here, so I'm going to add some more colour. Now if this was the non-cotton cellulose paper, it would have dried in different patches by now. See how this is still wet? It stays wet for a lot longer. so you can play around for a while, blending things out. And I'm going to try and just lift out, because I want the house to be a lot lighter in colour. So I need to try and remove these little bits of paint that's gone on the house. So I'm just agitating it with a damp brush. I'm going to get a little bit of tissue and absorb that up. It doesn't matter about the trays because they are going to be dark green, and the dark green will just cover that up. So I've dried that off with the heat gun just to speed things up. And I'm going to put some green hills in now. I'm going to make some of them browny, reddy, and some of them green. So the two greens that I'm going to use are Serpentine Genuine, which is this one. It's absolutely beautiful. And then I'm going to use the Jadeite Genuine as a little bit of, as a darker shade and colour. So if you don't have these colours, it's just like a warm yellowy green and then a darker green for the shaded areas. You don't have to use the same greens as me, but I absolutely love this Serpentine Genuine. So these are by Daniel Smith. So I'm just putting some of the Serpentine Genuine on my palette, quite concentrated, and some of the raw Sienna Light. And I'm going to try and vary the colours. So I'm going to start with this tiny little hill in the background. Oops. Paint that in. And I'll just leave that as it is. And then I've got to skip this one because they'll run into each other. So now I'll go for this one and just carefully paint that in. Then I'm going to do the lifting out technique. So I've rinsed the brush, dried it off on the towel so it's just damp. I'm going to lift some paint out across the top. So that's called the lifting technique. And then I'm going to get some of the raw Sienna Light and I'm going to drop that in that lighter area just like that, just to give it a little bit of variety in the colour. I'm just going to leave that one like that. So it's got a nice little darker bit down at the bottom. Now I'll paint this one with the warm green as well, the Serpentine Genuine. And then I'm just going to get a tiny little bit of the Jadeite Genuine on my brush right from the pan, and I'm just going to, that's a little bit much, but I've just dropped a bit on, and then I'll just kind of like spread it out a little bit across the bottom, so that's a different coloured green, just varying the colours. I might take some of that back out because it's a little bit, I'll lift a bit off the top and then lift a little bit more out. It's just a little bit dark there, so I'm going to lift a little bit of that out. It's a little bit much. Then I'm going to switch to this field here. So again, fill it with the Serpentine.
I just want to go out and walk with you. Baby, you know I just like to talk with you. You don't have to tell me anything that's new. I just want to go out and walk with you. I just want to see your shadow next to mine, sailing over pavement with our two outlines. I like to see the shape you're in from time to time. I just want to see your shadow next to mine.
Drop some of the darker mix in across the bottom. So there's different ways of creating the shade. You can drop a darker colour into the shaded area, and you can also, with a fairly dry damp brush, lift highlights out. So I'm going to create a highlight there so that it's light compared to the field behind. And drop some more concentrated paint at the bottom. Now I'm going to move on to the trees. Just like the fields, I'm going to paint the whole thing with the Serpentine and a fairly strong mix of dark green, and I'm going to go right around the edge with that. Just right around the edge to start. Drop even more into the bottom. So like this bottom section would be shaded. And then with some even stronger colour, drop that in to the very bottom. Kind of like a C shape on its back. Just taper that up and make a kind of thin outline. So I'm going to do that for all the other trees, and I'm going to move on to these larger areas. So I'm using burnt sienna. And then more concentrated. Make it a little bit stronger at the bottom. And a kind of thin line here across the top. So just want a little bit of a highlight there in the middle. And then I'm going to also do this colour on these fields here. So I'll do a few browny red fields. So I'm going to use the burnt sienna again. And drop in, for the shaded area, some burnt umber. This one I'm going to do the raw sienna. I'm just going to leave a tiny microscopic little gap here just so that they don't run into each other, because this one's still wet. Raw sienna and then burnt umber for the shaded area. I'm just going to blend that up. So we just want a nice gradient so it's lighter at the top. So it maybe seem a little bit fiddly, especially if you're a beginner, but just trying to do this will just improve your watercolour skills. So just attempting it, even if you don't like the outcome, you can just try again and just keep practicing. It'll eventually click how to control the watercolour. This one I'm going to do burnt sienna again. And then burnt umber. So I'm kind of just using the same few colours, but I just keep slightly varying them just to make the fields look like different kind of shades. And it doesn't matter about these little gaps here because I'm going to go over that with brown pen at the end. So now I can move on to these trees because that one's dried. I'm going to go burnt sienna again. This time I'm going to do the dark colour first and drop the raw sienna in the top area. Move on to the house, and I'm going to leave the roof area first of all. I'm just going to wet the whole of the house area. A tiny little bit of burnt umber and just kind of go around the edges. And clean the brush and then just kind of drag it out a little bit. You know, we want it to look kind of like it's maybe a white house or a light coloured house, but it's just a little bit grubby. And I'm going to outline that so it will stand out more with the outline. Now I'm just going to paint the last tree now that this one's dry.
I just wanna see the same things you can see, understand the meaning on a new degree. Maybe that could happen when you're next to me. I just wanna see the same things you can see.
I'm going to paint the roof in burnt sienna, quite concentrated. The windows I'm doing in burnt umber. Okay, so it's looking really cute, but it's gonna be absolutely lovely when I've completely finished it with some brown outlines around the whole thing. So I'll let it completely dry and then move on to that. So this is another art product that I bought quite a while ago and I haven't used it yet, and I might use it to do the outlines on this painting. So it's walnut drawing ink, walnut darkening medium, and a drawing stick. So it's got two different ends. It's got this like kind of soft kind of felt end, and it's got this wooden end. Now just have a little experiment with it. It might be no good for doing the lines on this. Right, so I'll do the little spongy end first. Yeah, that's going to be too thick, I think. And then the wooden end. Oh, I can get a really thin line with that, right on the corner. Oh yeah, I think I could use that end. So if you're following along and you probably don't have the walnut ink, there's also, you could also use sepia fine liner or a dip pen and ink, or even maybe a brown coloured pencil. In fact, I'm thinking, I'm a little bit worried to apply this brown ink actually. I might use a brown coloured pencil. I'm just going to glaze over with another layer because I think this bit's too light. I want a little bit more of this colour on there. So I think I'm going to kind of glaze over with the raw sienna.
Easy rider on the Station wagon going slow. Windows open, you are basking in the bluegrass radio. It is easy now to see you with your hand out on the wind. I keep this folded at the corner so that I could not forget. Folded at the corner so that I
think that looks so much better. I'm going to use a coloured pencil, dark sepia, so it's just like a really dark brown, and I'm going to outline everything, but it's not totally dry yet. It'll have to be completely dry.
Pink azaleas by your driveway shade our leisurely goodbyes. In your terry cotton sweater, with your arms sweeping the sky. It was then I had a knowing you were waving till the bend. I keep this folded at the corner so that I could not forget. Folded at the corner so that I could not forget.
So there we go, that's the finished picture. Quite simple, easy for beginners to do. Maybe a little bit tricky if you're an absolute beginner, but if you are just on beginner level, it should be simple enough to do. And that brown outline like really finishes it off. So that's two different ways to paint the same outline. If you want to do this one, if you haven't saw my video for that, if you go to my video page here on YouTube, and you can see all my other videos. So I'll list all the colours below that I used, and it will be available on my Patreon to download the line. Now the Patreon's working. The last few things that I uploaded, I could see them but other people couldn't see them. It was just the page just wasn't there, and it was because I hadn't published my Patreon page. Now I have published my Patreon page. This has happened twice now, and for some reason it just becomes unpublished. It says inactivity, but there was no inactivity because I've been uploading. So anyways, I don't know why it did that, but I'll just have to keep a check on that, and it is working now. So I hope you've found that video useful, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll have another video up soon.
Past the surfing whitewashed beaches, under cypress trees and smoke, carved like lovers